In 2014, board member Gary Johns presented the board with the idea of creating the conversation between the women in the famous photograph. The board unanimously gave Gary our support, and tonight it's that original idea coming to fruition. Tonight's event is about love. The love for Palm Springs, the love for architecture, the love for the Kaufman House, the love for a lifestyle that once and currently exists here in Palm Springs, the love of a Slim Aarons photograph, Poolside Gossip, and finally, the love of a long-standing relationship between two friends. It is with a heavy heart that I announce that Helen Jojo Captor passed away last week after a short illness. We've been very blessed and honored to work with the Captor family over the last 2 years. Our hearts go out to her family, her friends, and her husband, and 2014's celebrated architect Hugh Captor. Nelda, Helen, and Gary worked together on this event, and Helen was so looking forward to being part of tonight's presentation. The Modernism Week board, with Nelda's blessings, felt that it was important to tell the story tonight, behind the famous photograph, and proceed with the program. Nelda Lensk is a longtime resident of Palm Springs, working full-time as a realtor while volunteering countless hours to charitable organizations. Her years of living at the Kaufman House are full of wonderful stories, some of which I've heard personally, and I'm very excited to hear them firsthand. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Nelda Lensk and Gary Johns.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Nelda?
Yes, Gary.
I think the first question everybody wants me to ask you, who are you wearing?
It's a mid-century St. John.
Lovely.
A vintage St. John. And I wore it because of the yellow in the photograph that you'll see shortly, and the yellow accents in our former house, the Kaufman House. So that's why I selected this color.
Well, you look beautiful.
Thank you.
You
And
really
who
do.
are you wearing?
Oh, this old thing. I'm wearing Will Stiles. Nelda, looking at the photograph, it's what everyone is here for. Just tell us a little bit, give us a teaser of the photograph.
Well, it was Tuesday, January the 20th, 1970. And I remember exactly what I was wearing. It was a yellow terry cloth palazzo pant with a bare midriff top. And I still have the shoes. Here they are. They've been under my bed for 40 years. And Helen is wearing a white lace, same pajama outfit, same design, or same style at least. And I wanted to slap her. She looks so gorgeous. And you've seen the photograph on the cover. You'll see it later on Palm Springs Life of her standing with that wonderful white lace. It's just incredible. And we have Lita Barron walking down the side of the pool.
Folks, I'm going to introduce you to Lita.
Con tu querer y tu mirar, despierta niña, la noche ya se va. Con tu querer y tu mirar, despierta niña, niña, la noche ya se va.
Lita had a long Hollywood career. Here she is in a favored episode of I Love Lucy. This is an episode called Cuban Pals, and Lita was Ricky's cousin from Cuba. Lita also had a long Hollywood marriage to the matinee idol Rory Calhoun. The couple starred in several films together, He had a TV series called The Texan, and she appeared on The Texan quite a bit. They were well-loved and well-recognized Hollywood celebrities. And it is indeed a treat tonight to have Miss Lita Barron in the audience tonight. Lita, please. And Lita, you look beautiful tonight too. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And she's with her daughter Lori. Thank you, Lori.
You're right, brother. I'm Lori. Cindy's at home.
All righty. Well, here we are. We're back at the photo. And in keeping with the first question that I had asked you, I was going to ask you what you were wearing that day. But I think you've already pretty much told us about that.
Right.
And we have those sandals. Now, I asked Nelda earlier why she only brought the one.
I knew I would be wearing them tonight.
I think it's because she couldn't really find the other one. Tell us a little bit about how you and Helen met.
Well, I moved here in 1963, and I met Helen at various fashion shows. We did modeling together. In those days, we had Saks Fifth Avenue, Bullock's Wilshire, I. Magnin, Joseph Magnin, all right here in Palm Springs. And Helen and I did a lot of shows together. And the picture you're seeing now, we were hostesses for the Dinah Shore Cold Lake tournament. And that's me in the back with Barbara Sinatra, Barbara Marx Sinatra then, or Barbara Marx then, now Sinatra, and Helen in the front. Helen was always in the front. I'm surprised she didn't put her hand up. We all had big hair, as you could tell. She was a very, very established model in the early 60s. She was featured in Palm Springs Life article with Barbara, Helen, and Helen's up front again. Here she is with Bill Blass, and that's Helen on the left and Barbara Marx Sinatra on the right, and Bill Blass is in the center. That was a fashion show that they did at the tennis club.
They were gorgeous women.
And this is another shot with Phil Regan, Polly Bergen, Helen, or is that Barbara? Barbara.
Helen's in the center.
That's Helen in the center again. And Barbara, and that I think was Ray Ryan.
I believe that's right, yes.
He was an old timer here. In
Ray Ryan at one point owned the El Mirador Hotel.
Helen was a very much in-demand model. She loved clothes and she wore them well. This was a shot at the Desert Inn Fashion Plaza, which was right across the street.
Yeah. You had mentioned that Helen always knew where the camera was. She was a very relaxed model, but she always knew where the camera was and what her best angles were.
Exactly, and the cameras loved her.
I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's true. Well, now that we've met your gal pals from the photo, a very contemporary term to use, gal pals, I wanted to give the audience a little bit of a background. So let's take a little history lesson here. Our story starts in the spring of 1946. Edgar Kaufman and his wife Lillian purchased 3 lots in the Chino Canyon Mesa Tract number 3. In 1946, it was in a very remote part of Palm Springs. They hired Richard Neutra to design them a desert home. Neutra was no stranger to Palm Springs. He had been here in the late 30s to do the Grace Miller House in the lower photograph. And he would return in the 1960s, and he would return to the Kaufman House and visit Joe and Nelda when he was here working on the Maslin House. I think you knew the Maslins.
I did. My husband and Sam Maslin played golf together. We were there many nights for dinner. It was a wonderful Neutra home. It has disappeared, unfortunately. They tore it down several years ago. That sculpture that you see in the front is a Lynn Chadwick, and that was purchased at our art gallery. We had an art gallery at one time on Tocqueville's McCallum. But it was a wonderful, wonderful house.
Richard Neutra was 55 years old, and Edgar Kaufman was 62 years old when they presented the Kaufman House as a finished product. This is an early Joyous Schulman photograph of the house, beautifully presented on Palm Springs Life magazine. Many of you are familiar with the photograph, but for those of you who are not, this is actually Mrs. Kaufman here, placed on the pool float next to the pool, because Schulman was shooting a time-lapse photo, and he needed her there to diffuse some of the light coming through. Well, if you like that story. Mrs. Kaufman also had a little French poodle, and the French poodle is actually in the photograph. But because of the time lapse, it is just a blur of activity right in this little area. Mrs. Kaufman's French poodle. The time passed. Edgar passed away. Both of his wives passed away, and the house fell empty. But in the spring of 1963, Joe and Nelda Linsk relocated to Palm Springs first time. Nelda, do you recall your early visits to Palm Springs?
Oh, very much so. I remember the first time arriving in the Los Angeles airport, driving to Palm Springs. It was dark. We checked into the racket club. And I got up the next morning, I looked out the window and I saw these beautiful petunias and snapdragons in the mountains. And we were living in New York at the time. There was nothing like that in New York. I fell in love with Palm Springs. I fell in love with it. The next time we stayed at the Spa Hotel, and it happened to be in the middle of the summer, I think it was August. 110 degrees. We got out of the car and I said, "What are we doing here? It's like an oven." But I love Palm Springs. I've lived here. I wouldn't live any other place.
And so when you started taking up a little bit more permanent residency, you rented a wonderful house.
We rented the Claudette Colbert house, and at that time they were living in Barbados, and she was married to Dr. Preston. We had a realtor that kept showing us houses in the desert, and we didn't like any of them that we saw, and he kept mentioning the Kaufman House. He said, "You've got to see it." We didn't want that much maintenance. Finally, he brought a book over, and he said, "I want you to see this house. It's in the book." And so I looked at the picture, and I said to Joe, my husband, I said, "We've got to go see it." And we did.
And when you arrived at the house, what kind of condition was it in?
It was in terrible condition. It had been empty. No one had lived in it for many years, and the curtains were falling off the curtain rods. The pool was full of debris. But I said to Joe when we walked in, I said, "Look at this Arizona stone wall." I said, I fell in love with it. And we could have ended up with two houses because we made an offer on Claudette's house as well. She could have accepted our offer, and we made an offer on the Kaufman House, and of course they accepted our offer. And Claudette didn't, so that was a good thing.
And you bought the Kaufman House from the estate, from the heirs.
Yes,
And tell the audience what you paid for the Kaufman House.
Oh, right. $145,000. That was a lot of money in those days.
It was a lot of money. Now, did you move right in?
No, we didn't. We hired Arthur Elrod to come in and do the interiors, and we met Arthur at the Racket Club because he did a lot of the condos there at the Racket Club, and we went to a lot of the parties in those condos, and we fell in love with his work, and we hired him to do it, and he did a magnificent job. That's his own house.
Mm-hmm. And this appeared in Palm Springs Life, August 1962.
Right. Yeah, I loved his style.
Interestingly enough, folks, it's 1962. And color photography was really relegated mostly to the covers of magazines back then. So there are no color photographs of Arthur's house in 1962. However, these are color photographs taken yesterday, and the house is exactly as it was in 1962. Tell us about that.
Well, Arthur sold this house in 1969 to a man by the name of William Hamlin, and he was moving up to the Lautner house in Southbridge. And I remember I was over there one day, and I was trying to rearrange a fur throw on the sofa. And Mr. Hamlin was sitting on a chair over on the side, and he said, "Don't you touch that. That's the way Arthur left it, and that's the way it's going to stay." I said, "Okay, okay."
And there is a candy dish story.
That candy dish was still there, and I kept telling people not to eat any of it because it probably opens the house. They finally took it away.
Tell us about Arthur's style.
Oh, he was so creative. He was a genius. He matched odd pieces of furniture so that they would work together. He loved rich fabrics. He loved color. He loved to custom design the furniture. He did our second house. He did our art gallery, and he was brilliant.
So, folks, this home is exactly as it appeared then. It is today. I have been to the home for some special events, and it is truly beautiful. It is a statement on mid-century modern design, and talking about the custom furniture, those ottomans there that you see, and this extraordinary sofa that just envelops the room, and then of course that gorgeous carpeting that you can see there. So Arthur's work at the Kaufman House, unfortunately, was never photographed in color. We'll see a couple of black and whites later. But we do have these beautiful exterior photos of the house when Joe and Nelda lived there. These are from the mid-60s, and here you begin to see Arthur's use of yellow.
Yes, we have the yellow shades on the furniture, very similar to these chairs. We had a yellow enamel desk, I remember, in the bedroom. It was my desk, and a yellow chaise. In the loggia up above, we had yellow. That's where we lived, on the loggia up above.
There are those two
chaises.
chaises.
Lunch and dinner there. It had a dumbwaiter that went down to the butler's pantry, so if you forgot the lemon for the martini, you could just call downstairs and they'd send it up.
Let me interrupt you there for
yes.
a minute. Who would send it up?
Our butler.
He was a crazy Belgian.
Yeah, he was Belgian. Yeah, and he loved celebrities. He loved celebrities. He loved taking pictures of celebrities. I hated for them to come to the house because it was embarrassing. And the fireplace, as you can see, the chimney was the extension of the fireplace in the living room. And we had that fireplace going every night. And on a clear day, you could almost see salt and sea. It was so clear.
And then in the 1960s, when you lived there, there weren't many other houses around.
There were no houses across the street at that time. There was one house on Monte Vista and Vistacino. That was it. It was and then we had all the way from the house on the corner, the Benny house, to our front entrance. We had like a 6-foot wide bed of colorful petunias all the way down the street. People would come by in buses and take pictures. It was so beautiful. It was fun living in that house.
I'm sure it was. So before we leave Arthur, his work is still celebrated 50 years later. This was a home and garden, desert sun, recognizing his contribution to interior design. Quintessentially mid-century modern. Why was that? How did that happen?
He had great taste and style, and it shows in all of his work. There's a new appreciation for that period of interior design, and Arthur did it best, I think.
I think he did too. And it was Arthur who introduced you to the architect Bill Cody.
Oh, Bill Cody was a character. He was a great guy. He was funny, full of personality. Joe needed a room, an office. There was no office for him in the house. And I took over the wardrobe, the closet. So we had to build him another closet. So we hired Bill Cody to do that. And Bill Cody did it in such an exquisite way because he used the Neutra horizontal lines of the roof line, and you couldn't tell it wasn't a Neutra design home. We needed a room where we could sit down and read a newspaper. So we enclosed the area between the guest house and the main house with glass walls, did a sunken bar, and it turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful room.
And you worked with Arthur on it?
Yes, he and Arthur worked very closely. Yes.
And your friendship with Arthur?
We weren't just good friends, we were close friends. Arthur designed our second home, and we had a gallery called Gallery du Journal. This is taken in the gallery with Arthur. He had a greenhouse that he built up at Southridge, and he convinced my husband to build a greenhouse in our second house, and so that they could pot together. And they grew orchids, and they had the electric toothbrush, and they had the classical music going, and I would serve drinks to them, and they'd stay out there for hours. They had such a good time together. Arthur was a great guy.
So you always had orchids in the house?
Oh yes, always, always. Kind of like the Annenbergs. Not quite fair.
Understood. And then in 1964, you had only been in the house about a year and a half or so. You opened the house for the very first time for a home tour.
The house was 17 years old then, and it had never been open to the public. The Kaufmans were very private. They didn't open the house at all. No one was ever invited inside. It's the first time the Neutra house had ever been open, and it was Arthur Elrod's interiors. That was a big draw. The home tour cost $2.50 each. The other homes were all important also. Hugh Captor's home was on that same tour, on that same day.
I remember it, yes. Now here's a close-up from the newspaper covering the opening of the house.
I love that sofa that I'm sitting on in the foreground. It was done in a beige, and it didn't have a back to it. That's me on the right. That's Mrs. Casmer standing, and that's Pearl McManus sitting to the right.
Pearl McManus right there.
And you can see the design of the Neutra house where the walls of glass opened, and you had no supporting beam in the center. So it had great indoor-outdoor living area. It was fabulous.
Well, it was covered extensively in the newspaper, and I'll read you a quick excerpt from the paper. The public has rarely been offered the opportunity to see a private home of such architectural importance. It was more recently acquired by the Linsks, who commissioned Arthur Elrod to decorate it. A unique feature are two glass walls which can be rolled aside to open one entire corner of the room to the outdoors, just as Nelda described. And I think you can all see here that this is a glass. It's just completely open to the outdoors. Pretty spectacular. Pretty spectacular. Well, the tour with Neutra and Arthur Elrod's names attached got quite a bit of attention. It was covered in the Los Angeles Times, and it was also covered in, of course, Palm Springs Light. In the 1960s, Palm Springs had a little social register called Personages, and this little book came out each year. It was sort of like the East Coast version of a blue book, a social register. And 470 Vistacino was a Tony address. You and Joe are listed at 470 Vistacino. Mr. Frederick Lowe lived at 815 Panorama Road. And Raymond Lowe and his wife Viola were practically in your backyard, living at 600 Panorama Road. And that's just the L's. Tell us about your neighbors.
It was a great neighborhood. Raymond Lowe was an industrial designer, and he was best known for designing the Avanti, mid-century modern automobile. Fritz Lowe was a fabulous composer, as you all know. My Fair Lady, among his best-known works. And Jerry and Mary Benny lived next door.
Jack.
Jack and Mary Benny. And their tennis court came right up to our property line. We played tennis over there before, we didn't have the tennis court at that time. So we used their court all the time. And we had wonderful neighbors, and we were all friendly.
Folks, for those of you who don't know who Jack Benny.
Hey, I'm glad you woke me up early, Rochester. As soon as I finish breakfast, I'm going to start packing. We'll be on our way to Palm Springs.
Yeah?
Imagine me having breakfast. Hello?
Hello, Jack. This is Mary.
I'm going to pick you up in about 20 minutes.
Oh, that's why I called, Jack. I've decided to ride down to Palm Springs with Don Wilson.
Why?
You too. Other close friends, including Kirk and Ann Douglas.
Kirk and Ann, yeah, they were good friends of ours. They lived on Via Lola, and they would walk down to meet us down the Beachcomber, and they had a Don Wexler designed home, and it was wonderful. And my husband went to their house one night. I was out of town. He went to their house for dinner one night, and they had a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, and that dog jumped up into my husband's lap, and he was so taken with that breed. He called their breeder in New York and ordered the same dog. Someone went to New York to pick up the dog at JFK, and that's my little dog now, Marcherie, the same breed. I'm on the 4th Cavalier King Charles Spaniel.
Well, Palm Springs had an exciting nightlife in the 1960s. What were some of your favorite places?
Well, I think my favorite place was Ruby Dunes, and it was Frank Sinatra's favorite place. He had his own table in the corner. He had the red telephone behind him, so if he wanted to call the White House or anyone else, he could just pick up the phone and call them. That's Jimmy Van Heusen next to him, and that's Ruby Dunes on his left. Our table was right next to Frank's table, so we were there all the time. I remember Ruby had a man that worked for him by the name of Racehorse, and he lived behind the restaurant. And he would go to the airport every Friday and pick up live lobster. And of course, Ruby would call Joe and say, "Hey, I've got live lobster. Are you coming in tonight?" And of course, we always did, and he always had lobster. And Chi-Chi was fun. Jilly's was fun. That's where all the celebrities ended up at Jilly's, as long as Jilly's was open. He was open, I think, for maybe just a few years. R.J. Wagner was there all the time. Of course, Frank.
Frank and Joe were friends from New York.
Yeah, Joe was part of that rat pack that they had in New York, like they have in Vegas, because Joe's man that worked for him, his brother was like this with Frank. So Joe was part of that rat pack in New York.
Tell us about Don the Beachcomber.
Well, Don the Beachcomber was wonderful. The maitre d' was always drunk, but he always gave us our table, and we'd always be friends there, and it was, their Mai Tais were pretty good. Oh, that's David McDonald and Rosemary, his wife. He was president of the Steelworkers Union. And behind us is a case of chopsticks with our names on them. And every time we go in, they bring our own chopsticks over.
Nelda, I love the dress that you're wearing. It's quite beautiful. What was shopping like in Palm Springs in the 1960s?
Well, as I mentioned, we had all of them here. We had Saks, Fifth Avenue, we had Bullocks, we had Robinsons, we had I-Magnum, we had Joseph Magnums. But I loved the little shops. I remember there was a shop with the name of Dorothy Gray. And Dorothy was a friend of mine. She was married to a producer-director. And she would go on New York buying trips, and she would call me from New York, and she would say, "I found a dress that's so you." And she said, "I'm going to call you when it comes in." And so she would always call me, and I'd go in, and she was right. I would always buy it. It was something that I loved. And of course, Helen Rose was a good friend of Dorothy's, and she carried the Helen Rose line. And that was another favorite designer.
Tell us more about Helen Rose and your modeling her beautiful gowns in association with Dorothy?
Well, that's a Helen Rose that I have on there now, and Helen Rose was a famous designer then. I think I probably have 6 of them still in my closet. I'm going to have to get rid of them one of these days because they don't fit me anymore. But Dorothy Gray designed the wedding gown for Grace Kelly when she married Prince Rainier, and also Elizabeth Taylor's wedding gown when she married Nicky Hilton. And so she was a great, great designer.
And Helen Rose had actually started out as a, I think it was 20th Century Fox costume designer.
Right.
That's how she met Grace Kelly, and that's how she knew Elizabeth Taylor when she was marrying Nicky Hilton. But then she went into couture.
Yes, yes. Oh yes, and then she was selling to stores. She was wonderful.
And Dorothy Gray carried her line.
Right, right.
There was a number of fashion shoots that were taken or done at the house. Tell us about this harem pajama outfit here.
That's a Helen Rose. I remember it was a beige. I think I have that one. That's one of them in my closet. I think I still have it. It was a beige color, and it had a cape with a beaded collar at the neck. That was taken on the loggia at the Neutra House, and we had those chrome, aluminum rather, shutters that if it was windy or if it was sunny, we could close them. And the dress, the one on the black chiffon, was taken in the new room that we added between the main house and the guest house. And of course, that Palm Springs Life cover was done in December. I don't know the year, but I had to decorate the house in August for this to be shot in December. And that's my little Pico, my standard poodle.
And that gown, that white gown?
That's a Trevia. And that is the designer who did the air-raising pleated skirt that Marilyn Monroe wore in 7-Year Itch. He was a great designer.
Speaking of great designers, let's talk about Emilio
Oh,
Pucci.
Emilio, he was great. We met Emilio in Rome and went into his place, and Joe fell in love with his fabrics and his colors, and of course bought me every Pucci that he had. I was in heaven. I was in heaven. I had the long gowns, I had the chiffon blouses, the shantung pants, the shantung shoes. Oh, he made wonderful things.
He did. What was Rome like in the 60s? La
Wild.
Dolce Vita?
Oh, yes. Oh, wild, wild. Busy, busy, busy. Wonderful restaurants, wonderful food. Oh, I love Rome.
Yes, I think we all do. So because you had met Pucci in Rome, Pucci chose the Kaufman House for back-to-back fashion shows, one in 1967 and then another in 1968. Let's talk about the one in 1967 first.
It was wild and exotic, just like the headline says. The fabrics, the colors were incredible. You see the models, we had tables set up around the pool, and the models would dress in the master and come out that sliding door and walk around the pool. The women loved it, and all of their wigs were different colors. They were emerald green, bright red, orange, yellow, to go with the Pucci outfit. That's Hugh York. They flew Hugh York out from New York, the hairstylist. And there's Helen on the right, and there are all of them again. Helen, of course, is on the right with Hugh on the other photo. They were all braids and wigs, and they were fabulous. The women loved it.
It must have been pretty hectic having a fashion show at the house. You had models, you had hairdressers, makeup artists,
Right.
dressers. Hectic. That's something you were used to.
Oh yeah, we were used to it. Wasn't anything.
The 1968 show was the premiere of his collection. This is Helen.
Helen in that flowing chiffon. Oh, that was so pretty. I remember that to this day.
Here you can see the house in the background.
The theme was all Italian. Besides Emilio, we had the Italian consul general from Los Angeles, and he brought down the Italian umbrellas, the Chianti wine, and it was an Italian day at the house.
So I'm sure it was wonderful. That was the I'm going to read from the newspaper here. This was an excerpt from the newspaper talking about the fashion show. That was the colorful scene portrayed at the palatial desert estate of Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Linsk on Thursday. Eagerly awaited as one of the season's most festive events, more than 200 of the desert's social register attended the Italian-themed fashion show. And with all of that going on, you had a special visitor.
Yes, Richard Neutra called a few days before and said he was coming down, and he said, the only day I'm available to come down is on Thursday. And I explained that we were having a fashion show, and he said, well, I'm going to come anyway. So he and my husband hung out in the kitchen. He was a very quiet man, and he didn't like to be around a lot of people, so I'd go in every once in a while and check on them to see if they were all right, but I had 250 women out in the garden, so I had crazy Italians all over the place. Everyone wanted to meet Neutra, but he stayed in the house. He was very respectful of Bill Cody's work. He said he did a great job with the additions that we had in the house.
That's great. That's great. Well, here are some terrific photos of Helen in beautiful Pucci.
Those are the steps going up to the loggia. It was a great day. It's a great day. I've always loved this photo of Helen modeling at the Pucci fashion show. Isn't that fabulous, the way the dress is flowing?
Any recollection of the colors? I'm sure they were bright.
They were turquoise and white and I think a bright pink. It was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And you got in on it.
I got in on it. The picture was taken at the Kaufman House out in the garden. And I don't know if you remember Slim Morton. He owns the cactus garden down in South End. He did all of our cactus at the house, and he labeled the cactus. He had all the names of the species of the cactus. And there are some beautiful cactus there.
Now, I think I remember that you told me she had made this outfit for you, and this was shot as advanced publicity for the upcoming fashion show.
Right. That was in the Desert Sun, I think.
So, with all of this beautiful Pucci, it's all in black and white. But we did find this color photo.
Oh, I remember that well. Barbara Sinatra, at that time Barbara Marx, and my husband had the same birthdays. And we celebrated birthdays together. And this was taken at the house at their birthday. And there I am dancing with Steve Chase. And I remember Barbara wore the same outfit the same night. And she got the biggest diamond for her navel. And I got the biggest pearl for my navel. You know, Steve and Arthur, we have lasting impression on Palm Springs. We have the Steve Chase wing right here in the museum. We have the Arthur Elrod Sculpture Gallery. They were both very good friends.
Well, we're back at 1970. The phone rang. It was Slim Aarons.
Oh, Slim, it's so much fun. We had a house in Bedford Village, New York, and Slim had a place in Katona, right down the road from our house. He was in Palm Springs. He wanted to come over and just do some swimming pool shots. So we said, okay, come on over. He said, call up some of your friends and we'll make it very casual. He came over in about an hour with a tripod and a camera. No makeup artist, no hairstylist, nothing. And it was so casual that day, that famous photo. It was so casual. If I had known then what I know today, I might have dressed up a little more for that picture.
So folks, Slim Aarons made a career out of what he called photographing attractive people, doing attractive things in attractive places. Well, I think he hit the mark here, didn't he? Slim was 54 years old when he took the famous photograph. Here are some of the other popular photographs from the shoot that day.
That's my husband in a straw hat on the right with an orange shirt. That's Helen in the foreground again. Gorgeous, looking so gorgeous. And that's me talking to Steve Chase in the green and white jacket. And we're just socializing after that photo shoot. And we didn't know he was photographing us. But we have a lot of photographs that aren't part of the Getty Image collection.
Folks, we are using notes, as you can imagine. And the photo that we're looking at here is much smaller than the one that you're looking at there. So what I can point out for you here is that this is Raymond Loewy. Raymond Loewy standing there. This is his wife, Viola. This is a gentleman by the name of Cliff Lambert. And Doug McKay?
Doug Macy.
Doug Macy.
One of our tennis buddies at the Racket
Tennis
Club.
buddies, yes.
And that's Arthur Elrod sitting with Viola Loewy.
There he is. And here's a wonderful shot from the from that day also. This is also very popular. This is one of the Getty images. Can you see that one okay? Yeah. And okay, we have Helen there in the center. Speaking with Steve. Raymond Loewy here in the background. Joe here. Lita, here's Lita, and Lita's 3 daughters are here in the pool. And as we mentioned earlier, Lita's daughter Lori is here. Lori, do you remember which girl you are?
Right in the middle.
You're the middle girl there. All right. So it was a Tuesday. Did you take off from school?
No. Yes. Yes, we did. It was a lot of fun.
And because we can never get enough of this outfit, Palm Springs Life magazine chose this for the Modernism issue of their 2010 edition. Just stunning. And here is Nelda hurrying down the walkway with more champagne.
Right. That's what Slim said after the photographing. He said, "Now let's drink champagne." And we did.
Excuse me 1 second. Okay. Well, most of Slim's photographs are in the Getty archives, except one day a large manila envelope arrived with these outtakes from the photo shoot that day. These are Nelda's personal collection, and you see now it's just a lot of socializing going on. I know they're awfully small for you to see here, but the audience is seeing them much larger in the background here. Tell us about that house in the background. I'll point it out for the folks right up there.
That's the Hearst property, Rosalie Hearst property, and she was right up the hill from our house. She was a great gal. She was great. We were close friends.
James McNaughton Design.
James McNaughton Design, you're right.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
You're more than welcome.
Is that you?
Yes, ma'am.
That's sweetheart.
But I've lost my place now.
I'll take over.
All right, so Nelda, you didn't know that he had selected which photo.
No, I did not know until the book came out, when he sent me the book. I had no idea, and I didn't think the photo would be in the second book that he did until I opened it up. There it was in centerfold.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Slim did 2 very, very popular books. The very first one here is called A Wonderful Time. That was the 1974 book where Poolside Gossip appeared first. The second book here is a little later. Some of you will recognize the name CZ Guest, and that's CZ Guest on the cover of that one. Yeah, with her dogs, yes. So why is it? Why did this one, with all of those attractive people doing attractive things in attractive places, why this one?
I don't know. Slim called me one day, and he was at a book signing party in New York, and he said, "Why is this photo so famous?" And I said, "Because I'm in it." He laughed. He thought that was so funny. You know, he captured something in this photo that attracts people to it. I think it's probably famous because it's our lifestyle here in the desert. It's the living outside, it's the mountains, it's the sun, it's the relaxed, atmosphere, the pool. I mean, that's our way of life. We don't always dress that way in the daytime by the pool, but but it does show our lifestyle. I think that's why. There's a gallery in New York that called me and said that that photograph is the most popular. She sells more of that photo than any other.
Well, it is very popular. It is very popular. But from the time it appeared in the book in 1974, it sort of just got dusty on the shelf until about 1996. Vanity Fair pulled that photo out off the archives of the Getty, and they used it to illustrate American society in the 1960s and the 1970s. And it was about that time
when I started getting calls on it. People would call me from all over saying, "Have you seen that photo?" Like I had never seen it before. Sure, I've seen it. I have a colleague that called me or sent me an email, and she had seen it in Dubai. She was on a plane going to Spain, and she took a picture of it on the plane and emailed it to me and said, "Here you are again." She was walking down the street in the Hamptons with her daughter and walking by an antique shop, and the book was open to that photo.
Of course.
And she points it out to her daughter and said, I know her. And the daughter said, "Mom, please, please." Anyway, she sent me an email that time. So she said, I told her she can't get rid of me. This photo is all over the place.
Yeah. Well, folks, it really has. It has taken on truly a life of its own. It has become very defining of a certain period of time in Palm Springs. It's certainly representative of the Palm Springs lifestyle, as you just mentioned. It includes a beautiful swimming pool, great architecture, and attractive people doing attractive things. And don't we all think that that's the lifestyle that we want to lead? Well, the photograph has really become very popular. You'll find it in the best homes. It's everywhere. And people love having their picture taken with them. I think this is Manny's home in Old Las Palmas. Here we have Lori and Larry and their dog. David and Jana. A bunch of realtors enjoying pizza. And it's not just popular in Palm Springs. This is Frederick and Laurent in Paris. It hangs in the entryway of their Paris apartment. They individually wrote to both Helen and Nelda to tell them how much they love living with that photograph. And here is their note to Helen. It is everywhere, isn't it?
It is everywhere. It's blown up at the Mitch's restaurant in Palm Desert. It's almost the size of the wall.
And just to put a period at the end of the sentence, it's also in the home of pride and joy in Saugatuck, Michigan. Just last month, actually folks, it's 4 weeks ago today, 4 weeks ago today, you went back to the house.
Right. It brought back so many memories. I remember it was a beautiful January morning, just like in 1970. I'm sorry. When we lived in this house, it was more exposed to the street. The boulders were all huge, and there wasn't as much planting. And I mentioned earlier we had a 6-foot row of petunias going down the street. And Jack Benny's house was right next door to us. But when we went back that day, it brought back all those memories.
Now, I know that you have stayed in touch with the house. You had been back over the years several times.
Right.
But it was Helen's first time back since you had lived there.
Right. Yeah.
She was having a good time that day.
Oh, she was. She was really having a good time. it was a beautiful day, just like it was in 1970. Sunny and gorgeous.
The photographer was Klaus and his wife, and they were Klaus and Kelly, and they were quite a lovely couple.
Yes,
now, you've worked with a lot of photographers, and I think you really fell in love with
They
him.
captured the house and everything about the landscaping. They did a magnificent job. Magnificent job that day.
We just relaxed.
Just very, very casual. We didn't know they were taking photos then either. We were just remembering fun times at the house. Joe and I sold the house in 1971 to Eugene Klein, who owned the San Diego Chargers. That house stayed in my life for a while because after my husband passed away, I went into real estate and coincidentally sold the house to Barry Manilow. And then I sold the house to the present owner. He has done the most magnificent job restoring that house. I can't say enough about it. He's just done a fabulous job. Brent, I hope you're here today. I want to thank you for inviting us and allowing us to go back into the house for this photograph. Thank you.
Well, and it was a treat for me. You can imagine. Do you have a picture with them? It meant the world to me. As Chris mentioned earlier, I did come up with this kind of crazy idea. When we were backstage just a few minutes ago, Nelda said, "How did you talk me into this?" Well, I did, and both of the ladies were very generous with their time, with their old scrapbooks, with their memories. So I want to take this opportunity to say thank you for this great opportunity, for allowing me to tell this story. And folks, there's a lot of stories here. This is just this story.
I want to thank you, Gary, because it was your idea to do this for Modernism Week.
Well, and in preparing for this, I had a wonderful afternoon with Lita. Lita, didn't we have a great time that day?
We certainly did.
Yes, and it was a lot of fun hearing your stories too. So again, I just want to thank Lita, of course, and Lori. Thank you for being here tonight, and Nelda. And there's a rare solo. This is a rare photo that Klaus captured that day. Last thoughts?
Where did 45 years go? I don't know. It just seems like it was a year ago.
That's a beautiful picture.
And ladies and gentlemen, quite unintentionally, it happened.
Cherish those photographs.
Yes, and I will too. And I will.
Maybe we'll hang that one next to the other one.
You know, obviously the photograph, the Slim Aarons photograph, well known as Poolside Gossip. But I think you told me that that Slim did not name the photograph.
No, that was named Poolside Gossip later, much later.
Much later. This photo, the photographer sent me a little email the other day when he sent me this photo, and he said, "What do you think about Poolside Reunion?" Nelda, would you like to take a couple of questions from the audience?
Sure.
Anybody? I see somebody there.
What were you gossiping about?
Everybody asked that. Everybody asked that. I think Helen and I were just saying, when is this going to end? We can have our champagne. We were just talking about everything, probably what we did the night before, what we were going to model the next day. I don't remember.
I see a question way in the back.
Do you remember how much Lynn Chadwick's sculpture sold for when he sold it?
Oh, I don't, but not as much as it would sell for today.
Oh, I tried to buy it. I was just...
You did?
Yeah.
From the Madison property?
Yeah, from the auction.
You did, and you didn't buy it?
He got away from me.
Oh, it did. Oh, what a shame.
I was in Chicago at the time, and I wanted to bring it back here.
Gary, do you remember what it did sell for?
Before the buyer's premium, it was $55,000.
There's one here at the museum, over on the side in that building.
That's never goes missing. You'll love it.
The large one that's here in the museum came from our gallery also.
We see a question here.
In the original Poolside Gossip photos, there's a pot that looks like marigolds, I'm guessing. This must have been very intentionally placed. And next to it, looks like I've looked at it before, it looks like a little sculpture, like dolphins or something.
I know, I'm trying to find that sculpture back. I want to get it back so badly. I think we left it in the house when we sold it. So I'm trying to find out where it is, and it's turtles climbing up on a wooden block. I love that sculpture.
I thought I could get back to it.
It's
There it is. There it is. This is the sculpture
They're
he's
turtles.
referring to.
Was that there at the pool all the time, or was that just...
all the time.
And there was another terrific sculpture up here at the end, the two figures. I think
I
you
have
that
those.
today.
I have those today, and they've just been refinished. They look just like that. They're beautiful. That's David Wynn from London.
Sir?
Yeah. What time during the day was this photo taken?
At noon,
At noon?
maybe 11, late morning, noonish. Because the sun was right above us. Look at that shot. Isn't that beautiful?
Another question? Sir?
Did you visit when Barry Manilow lived there?
Oh, yes. Well, I had it listed when he sold it to Brent Harris. So I was in that house a lot. He came back to me anytime.
And didn't he change it?
He changed it quite a bit. But Eugene Klein made the biggest change because he took out all of our white and put all dark brown. Dark brown carpet, dark brown wall coverings. And it changed its look with all the different owners, but Brent Harris has restored it beautifully. He brought Marmol in, the architectural firm. They called me all during the renovation saying, there was a clock in the kitchen on the wall. Do you remember what it looked like? And of course I had no clue. I couldn't remember. But they brought it back to all the original fixtures, the knobs, the fittings, everything.
Another question? Sir?
Why did you decide to sell the house?
We wanted something smaller. We had the 6 lots around it, and we just wanted to scale down. So we moved over about 3 blocks away on Camino Norte. And Arthur did that house for us as well.
Anything else?
What was the square footage of that house?
Oh, I should know that being a realtor, shouldn't I? 45 years ago, let me think. I know it was over 3,000. And then, of course, when we added the other rooms, it made it much larger. Maybe it was around 4,500.
Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you very much for coming.
That was great. Yeah, because that was the end already.
Oh, sorry. I was all right.
We're okay. Yeah, we're okay.
We both